This is the 2019 Collaborative Court Training for the Temporary Judge Program. I have to tell you before we even start that, first of all, I think I recognize almost everyone in the room. I should have this as advanced and how to go from collaborative courts to judgeship or whatever it is you would like to do, because I have so many of you that I really, you've been doing this longer than I have, and doing it well and doing it from the get-go. So I will try and make it, though, very pertinent for both groups. Groups that, if you've never done collaborative courts before, you are interested in collaborative courts, and those groups coming in that have vast experience. My name is Mary Krieber-Barapapa. I know most of you. I have seen just about all of you. I'm relatively new as a judge. I was appointed in 2015, stayed on the criminal calendar until August of 2016, and then was asked to come into collaborative courts. In part, and being a judge in the trial courts, that is fun. Doing trials is really fun. But I had come in, originally coming in from juvenile court, back in, before even going to the public defender's office. I worked for a private firm that took me and sent me up to Santa Clara County to open a collaborative court for dependency back in the time frame when it was just the brand new, most cutting edge work we had ever seen. They took me up there in law school to set up that court. So that was my first intro to collaborative courts. And that, even back then, introduced me to some of the really leaders back in the day who are still leaders. I mean, those people I follow around like most people follow around movie stars, and they're still some of the most cutting edge people and doing some of the most cutting edge work. And then I followed that through juvenile, adult, through the public defender's office. I had worked through all the drug courts, all the DUI courts. I had been doing trials, and so the setup for the mental health courts was really not in my arena at the time. And then I had come back as a supervisor handling mental health courts for public defender's office. And then I did what you may have the chance to do, which is I worked for probate in the probate unit for the public defender's office, and actually headed that unit. That's the mental health unit. And what you, I'm sure, will see, and what the best part about being a temporary judge may be, is that crossover of understanding mental health and the issues that we're seeing in these collaborative courts from not the perspective of only criminal, but you see it from the civil end, from, you see it in family law, you see it in civil. We see these issues coming up in all case types. So it was a very good background for me. So when Judge Perez, who followed Judge Lindley, left, then I was asked to come in. Although I did not think I was ready at the time. I'm still not sure that I was ready at the time, because, as you can imagine, taking over collaborative courts was a huge undertaking in many ways, and what I think is some of the most important work we're doing, and some of the most, again, cutting edge. So that's my introduction. The way I set this up is just three things. We start with just kind of the policy, which could be interesting for some of the people who have been around. There are policy issues that are facing these courts. It is right in the middle of just about every conversation that has to do with homelessness, with veterans, with mental health. These are the issues that are facing our judges, and so collaborative courts over the last couple of years have become extremely visible. And I think most of you know Judge Lindley. The fact that she was able to create these courts and watching what she did in a time frame and when she did it is something nothing short of incredible. It was like the stars were aligned that she was able to do what she did in establishing CCB1 and establishing collaborative courts in our county. She is changing generations, and she is changing, or has changed, I think, the way we look at most of our criminal cases. But now coming in as the second generation, is what we call it, in this realm, is much different. It's a much different environment. It is no longer under the radar. You are under, in that department, and in collaborative courts in general, so all departments, an extraordinary amount of attention. There is not a day in CCB1 that we don't have visitors from out of state, in the state, other counties. I have every assemblyman, every Congress person coming in, every person that's interested in the courts. I have LA County coming on a regular basis, just about every other month. I have VA and veteran people coming in from out of state. So there's a constant, really a constant desire for other counties and other other locations to come in and see what we're doing. So first is really going to be some of those general policy issues, and they are very interesting. The second is just going through the team dynamics, what to do in a case specific. There is a collaborative court for everyone that is in this room. If you have never touched a criminal case, there are calendars that are full diversion calendars that suspend criminal proceedings, and you will know by the end of this that you could walk in and be very comfortable in just about any of those arenas. So you can start with, if you're not familiar with criminal at all, you could start in one, and we'll go there, and then the process, so you understand process, and we're not going to nitpick through the evaluation process for each court, or I will lose you in about 2 seconds. But we'll go through the general process of what's happening in a collaborative court, and that will also include best practices. And then finally, there's training. Not everybody geeks out on this like we do, but I know that some of you do because I see you, and I know that you will. There's ongoing training, and that's training at a national level, and it's training at a state level. And so we've got resources that will help. If you are just someone that likes to look around on your computer and really look into this, there's room for growth in that arena as well. So let's start. So quick history for anyone that doesn't know, and I know I'll call you my seniors here because my seniors are masters in this. The history of collaborative courts really is, Orange County has been some of the most cutting edge courts nationally forever, since the inception. We were on that early adapter list back in the beginning. And that includes the original drug courts. It includes the original DUI courts in 2004. The community court building itself is the location at CCB1. That in and of itself is a masterpiece that even now we are recognized as a national mentor site, because the co-located services model is something that is the absolute, I'm telling you that every state that comes down looks at that location as an off-site, not in the courthouse, service providers, services change per, depending on the calendar. That model, as small as it is still one of 5 national mentor sites, and it's still impressive in its own right. And that picture, so if any of you have not been there, is the hallway. If I gave you a picture of the outside, you'd probably never show up because it's so depressing. It looks like this old county building, and it has a flag, and you have all these people outside, and the building itself looks dilapidated. So just know that inside of the CCB1 location is a gem. And it is gem not just because of what it looks like, but it is a gem because the people that are there on site are phenomenal. So 2008, mental health courts became established. We now have the 5 in the county. 2011 was the 5th, the assisted intervention, and we'll go through that in a second. 2015, military diversion. If anyone, have you done military diversion? A couple of you. So military diversion is one that we are really watching. It is a growth population that may be our largest growth population, second only to mental health. And it has also gained some national attention as far as what we're doing. In 2019, where we are now, the short version is this. We have come from courts that in the day, we took what we knew and we didn't know as much as we know now. And that's not just anecdotally, we're looking at the science. So these courts are looking at the data, looking at the science, and it's changed. We used to be courts that we really took the low-hanging fruit. That's across the board. Drug courts, we used to take, oh, you're a good drug dealer, you're a good drug user. We think we can work with you, you've got a great attitude. And we really thought that that was what we should be focused on. And really, we've gone so far away from that. We've gone to assessments. We've gone to tools, because what we know now is what we think we know. We don't know anything. And so what you think you know when you walk in there, I don't care what the specialty or your background is. The reality is you cannot, as a bench officer, and realistically, you can't, as an individual stakeholder, necessarily calculate how a person is going to do in the program. So your assessment tools and this data piece have changed the way we do business. It also has changed our community directly. Finally, knowing now 9 separate programs to clarify. So these are program types. This includes one type of program is drug court. We have drug courts in all of the outlying justice centers except for Central. The Central Drug Court then is going to be at CCB1. You have DUI courts in all justice centers. Again, the Central Justice Center location is going to be at CCB1. And within the programs, there's 5 separate types of mental health programs. There is Homeless Outreach Court, which is completely different. There is the Veterans Treatment Court, there is Military Diversion. So of those calendars, we call 10 of those at CCB1. Many of them, including all of the mental health courts, are countywide. And then our localized drug court and DUI court are going to be jurisdiction of residents. Veterans Court, countywide, and Military Diversion, countywide. So that's kind of in a broad stroke, trying not to fire hose too much information at you. That's where we are with collaborative courts today. So, not my best slide, but it makes the point. It goes back again to every single court that you'll go into. This is what we're focused on. We are focused on recidivism. We are seeing, and the policy of sending someone to state prison and then seeing them come back, a much more educated criminal who has a 97% chance of recidivism. We are the response in some ways to that generation, so the 80s. We are looking at these different arenas as our focus, and homelessness is something that is incorporated in all of our collaborative courts. So it's an awareness. You're not meant to know everything about homelessness, you're not meant to know about every best practice with the homeless population, but it's good to keep in mind that this is something that overrides all of the courts. So to be clear, I have a drug court and we have people coming in. They will have mental health issues. They need to be managed, but we are going to have people that are having issues that can be managed. That is still the mental health issue, but in a drug court. I will have veterans in all programs. So veterans will go to drug court, veterans can go to the Veterans Treatment Court, veterans can go to Military Diversion, veterans can go to any court, and there are services that are attached and a different thing that you need to pay attention to. But veterans, it's a priority for our county. Suicide risks are a priority for our county. Homeless veterans, priority right now for our county. There is an awareness of opioids and specific to veterans, priority for a county. With that, and I know again, I have multiple people here who have run those Veterans Treatment Court and Military Diversion, but they're also changing practices. How we deal with veterans. How is it different to deal with a veteran that has, PTSD or PTS, depending on who's talking about that. Trauma background, addiction secondary to the trauma. There are issues specific to veterans, and veterans are just one example, that the treatment responses are also specific to. So when you see these people coming in and you're doing these mass calendars, you'll recognize that you're talking to a lot of different people depending on where that person's come from and what the track is. Transitional age youth, I'm hoping I spelled that right. Transitional age youth is it's a very hot topic right now because we're getting a lot of foster youth or former foster youth. We're watching the brain development studies, the science on the brain development studies. We know that transitional age youth is not going to go through a program the same way a 40-year-old who is, got 20 years of a history of meth use does. They do not think like a regular person. I'm pretty sure I can say this in this group and this group only, but they also don't respond the same as you would see other participants. So we have specialized tracks within our program, treatment tracks, and in some of the mental health courts, we have clusters of this transitional age youth group because support services are available. So also big concept, transitional age youth, 18 to 26, is someone that you really want to pay attention to. You want to flag that person in your data. That is someone that we really want to know if we've got them in the right pocket. Substance abuse as I say this almost every time. I love drug courts because you gotta love a court that, it's just a meth user. I'm like, it's such a relaxing morning. You just got 20 years of meth use and a couple of aggravated assaults. It's just so so simple in comparison, right? But it's also something that we know, it's an easy one for our county to recognize as the recidivism population, and that's a population that we can absolutely change. As the easiest, arguably, population, that's something that we can't lose sight of in the mix of all what's the most popular issue? Is it homelessness? Is it this? Is it that? We have to look at each of these issues. So pay attention on eval in the course of your discussion. These are the big picture items. So, our courts. So the easiest way to divide up the courts are military courts or military and veteran, mental health courts as the next level, and separately the substance abuse courts. And I put the homeless outreach court in there, which we'll talk about specifically. Each of these courts we know, has anyone not ever been to CCB1? Anyone not handled a collaborative court before? So that's I think this is something to kind of don't get overwhelmed with. Because within these courts, again, there are levels that you can start with that may be easier than some, especially if you're coming from a civil background or a family law, and this is new lingo. Because anyone of my seniors who have been there will tell you that CCB1 should have a whole dictionary of letters, of all the things. We can do a whole conversation of all letters, and I'll get to that in a minute. So the military courts, overview of the military courts. Military diversion we talked about is new. It is a very interesting court in that its growth is exponential. 140 at this point is about where we're at. I thought we'd be at 160. We've had a lull in the incoming and graduation, so we're watching that. The VA is watching that. The national statistics are watching that, because military diversion is a hot group, meaning they're new to treatment, they are resistant to treatment and to the VA typically. That's not always going to be the case. It is a VA reporting if they qualify for VA services, and then healthcare is the provider if it's healthcare and they don't qualify for VA. It's misdemeanors only. And what happens for those of you who have not done any of the criminal courts or criminal cases and or these courts, we suspend, the motion is handled in the outer court. They suspend criminal proceedings, and then they send the person down to CCB1. So you don't have to worry about time waivers and issues that may come up, which aren't big issues, but it's nice to just be able to focus on this is the calendar. When they're in there, it's a 2-year maximum. You can't go past the maximum. So we go through that calendar, and it flows very easily. You've got to get out, and I have a bench book that I'm working on that now they've decided to use the bench book for all judges, so it's become another masterpiece that I'm working on and have not completed for today. But you will have the bench book, and you'll have the bench guide for each court there with a copy of the team who you'll be working with when you come in. That's the new how we're going to do business in CCB1. Even if you've been there 1,000 times, because people change, the teams change, and you need to know just walking into CCB1, it's hard to know who everybody is, even if you've been there for years. So on the military diversion calendar, again, criminal proceedings, those motions are done in the outer court. We have access to those motions on ELF, so you can read the motion, you'll know what is going on, but I doubt if you will have time. You'd like to get into the building at 8 o'clock because the calendar generally needs to be called. You need to be out there by 8:30 because it's a huge calendar and it runs like this. You go in and if you've been there, the seniors will tell you, the staff in CCB1 and the staff in these courts are golden. Those super clerks are amazing. They will make sure that you do not miss anything. They will make sure that there's a coordinator on one side and a clerk on the other. You really can't mess things up. They won't let you. And they'll make sure that you're just moving things through and that you have everything you need. So you go out, they'll give you the reports ahead of time. What I do when I call that calendar is I put healthcare staff first and the reports from VA second, and I call each one. Because I've got 100, it seems like 100, they're not really 100, but I've got many private counsel in there, and it is, are they in compliance? Are they not in compliance? Am I finding and what finding am I making? So compliance, non-compliance, and do I need to give them time to get things straightened out? So I say, I'm not making a finding, we'll reserve finding until next date. So third finding that you make, and then you just set it over. If it is a new treatment plan, you make an order for the treatment plan, order is filed as confidential, and you put it over. Newer people come back sooner. People who are doing well in the program, you start putting them out 2 and 3 months. And you should have recommendations from the VA and or healthcare as to that, because they'll know, is a person really struggling? Do I need to see them back in 2 weeks? And so you just ask. Healthcare, is there a recommended date? Are they in compliance? Are there any treatment changes? Are there anything that needs to be resolved? How are you doing to the person there? Starting with that conversation, and don't miss that piece. It's not going to be your comfort zone. You're not going to know the population. But really asking them how they're doing in program, simplest of all questions. They might not give you the full answer, but you'll get at least pieces. It's kind of a developed technique, and there's exercises and there's ways that you can start really doing motivational interviewing. There's all levels of how you interface with a population. But if you're brand new and you're just kind of getting the process down, just making sure that you're asking the person how they're doing, what's improving, keep it positive, keep it reinforcing on that end, and then move over to healthcare on the updates or VA on the updates. Make your finding, move on. Second call, any question, because you don't want it to start hanging up your calendar. You get through arguably 35 cases pretty fast, and then the second call, if there's an issue which look, they're failing to engage completely, or they're having a new law violation, or there is something happening. There is either a stipulation that the matter returns to the criminal court, or they could have it come back because they're going to want to talk to the judge that's normally in there. Do not be offended by it. Do not be worried about it clogging up a calendar. Just let it go over. Let it move to that answer, and go on from there. It is a straightforward calendar with that, because you're not doing any of the assessments. All those motions are coming from the outer court. So anyone new, you get familiar with the lingo. It's a really good court to do when you're trying to figure out OIF, OEF. Give me some. What are the other ones? I mean, I find some days that I talk just in letters when I'm in that court. So if you're getting familiar with the lingo, with the cases, if you don't do criminal cases and you're not used to seeing DUIs, if you're not used to seeing child abuse cases, there are cases that you're going to be looking at. Words like, are we talking about restitution? Even in a diversion court, those are concepts that are coming up and that we are working on. So anything questionable, you just put it over for the next week, when hopefully I am there and that you're not back again. But not anything that you have to feel the pressure for. And again, no time waivers, no real issues on those time issues. So very comfortable if you are getting used to, again, the criminal case or the military cases. Is everyone trained in ELF? No, not everyone. Most people. Who's trained in ELF? All right, so a majority. We have to be careful with ELF. It's invaluable for the collaborative court. It's invaluable for me. But you have to keep an awareness of what you put in ELF, because it's a collaborative court. There's HIPAA-protected information that is, in fact, utilized for the collaborative court. What you have to keep in mind is that absent a waiver, you don't want that information going on to another judge. So let's say they get themselves in an absolute mess of a situation, and you're putting in there, well, they're now diagnosed as schizophrenic and not taking medication and blah, blah, blah. That's a problem if you're the defense counsel, having that information transferred to another judge. So you have to be really, when you're using that, just be very aware of the HIPAA and the protections. Yes?
Is collaborative court pro tems able to go on ELF?
I think so. No, mine are. I thought I have some. Do you go on ELF?
No, I don't.
We never did.
We never
No?
have. I thought we weren't supposed to. I get paper calendars, I guess.
Well, we get paper calendars because so many are not familiar, but let me check on that. I think I'm losing my check. Is there a prohibition against getting ELF access on collaborative courts?
No, not at all.
Okay. So I think that it's a tradition that has been, because it's easier for the clerks and it just is easier for a generation that didn't know ELF before. We were getting people in that weren't comfortable with ELF, so I think it was by default. So using ELF though on those major calendars can be, I mean, it can really tie you up, right? You've got a whole 35 cases on ELF. You may not want to deal with that. So I don't have any particular, in CCB1, I have no preference. But if you're having, with that being said, if you have people that are having issues and you're sending it over because judge needs to take care of X, Y, and Z, putting in there judge needs to take care of X, Y, and Z would save me, right? Because, yes.
There's a clerk in Collaborative, right?
Oh, I have super clerks. They're not just regular clerks.
Don't they handle the ELF? I mean, maximum my
No.
understanding is ELF is on bench is more just to follow along what's happening, but the clerks actually make the entries in the ELF.
So you're talking about minutes. So they enter the minutes. So you're looking at vision. So you do not have to use ELF. You do not have to put in the next date. You do not have to use anything. But there are, I should have had a visual. When you look on ELF, there's 3 squares above what's happening on the particular case. So you click on the person's name. The cases are lined up in the top, and you start with the first case. And the case itself will have 3 boxes. Clerk uses the one on the right. Collaborative courts uses the one in the middle. And judges all the time use the one on the left for case-specific notes. You take that, and generally you're going to have, say, 7 cases on a WIT calendar or one of the bigger calendars. One person, 7 cases, cut and paste, cut and paste, cut and paste, that this is the issue. And then every single file has that note for whatever the collaborative court. It is when you're doing high evaluation calendars, so I have programs, like I had 16 evaluations for WIT court on Monday. So I have to keep notes. I have to know what's going on because they'll come back and waiting for psych evals. I mean, it's a continuum of events that I don't want in minutes. So that becomes important. Other military diversion, I don't think it's necessary. But if there's a note that you want to give to me on a specific issue, I would open it up and just I would play with it. It takes a while to get comfortable with that sometimes. And it depends on the calendar. So does that help? Not help me
Well,
answer.
I know in the traffic that it says it's not any note that needs to go in the clerk will put it. That you don't have to worry about doing any entry. In fact,
Right. You do not have to worry about entries. Do not think of it as a mandatory, like the case is not going to get set on a calendar. That is a clerk. I'm talking about having notes that need to go judge to judge. Because if I have Commissioner Evans in there, we go back and forth and he writes everything. I mean, he writes everything. This is what's happening. And it means that it could prevent an extra court date, right? If we don't have to go backtrack. So, but again, military diversion, easiest of calendars. Second only maybe to outreach court, but even that has its other issues. Veterans Treatment Court is a step up in that step up on responsibility. You only have misdemeanors in military diversion. You're only generally going to have felonies in Veterans Treatment Court. And this is for my group who has done the Veterans Treatment Court. Again, there used to be a lot of that discussion about, hey, we like this person, we don't like this person. We have gotten evaluated by the NADCP, we've gone after mentor status, we have been trained and retrained, and now we train. We're trying not to have that subjective evaluation. The example that we used was gang members, right? So they came down and they were evaluating us, and probation said, oh no, we're not going to take them because they're gang members. Well, a gang member, if you're living in Santa Ana and you have a criminal case, good luck not having some gang tie potentially on some of these cases. And so they said, you can't be putting yourself in a position of being subjective. This goes back then to what we have done and what we are continuing to do with the manuals. And the manuals will become, you're not going to want a copy of each, but the manuals are going to become your best friend. I will lay a manual out for you if I'm going to have a collaborative court or a temporary judge come in on a collaborative court. Because the manuals themselves go back to the criteria. Criteria generally, just so you have an idea, we're not going through nitpicking through court by court. Generally speaking, if there's a dead body, I'm not going to take them, right? That's just as a policy. The older policies were, if it's 290, we can't take them. Why? It's not because we couldn't treat them. It was because the housing issue. So that's actually changing. So now we're moving towards to have criteria that say consistent with super strikes. Oh, sorry. This is where I go into lingos. So sex offenders generally, and not just sex offenders, but those who are registering as a sex offender, those cases had issues, and even now we're exploring that because those cases are coming back after going to state prison and we're having more issues than before. So still not big fans of having the dead bodies, but we have a change happening. The DA's office has come in, and the DA's office has taken a new approach on this. On some levels, I think I scared the new DA by saying, I only take strikes, right? Why would I even bother with the low grade stuff? And he wasn't ready to hear that at the time, but he is ready to hear it now because I'm talking recidivism rates, and the idea is if you're hyper supervising and hyper resourcing, it's a dollar amount, right? When you talk to that generation, or not generation, I take that back. Can I undo that on the tape? It wasn't a generation discussion. But it is a discussion in how familiar you are with these courts. So it used to be we would talk about, again, the lightweights, who we can help, who we cannot help. Now it is, if you take someone that's their second time drug case and they're not really all that tied in, their recidivism rates are mixed and their acuity levels are not as high, and you super resource, and it's a lot of money going into these cross resources, yeah, your outcomes could be good and your recidivism is reduced, but that's on a person that otherwise may or may not have had such big problems down the line. So what kind of treatment do you give them? And would they have actually benefited from more treatment, less supervision? And now move all the way forward to what we have now with these assessment tools. And the assessment tools are clear. We want the high risk for recidivism. That's my target population on just about every group. I want those people because those cost us the most in hospitalizations, in jail, in just future crimes, in how many contacts they would have with police, on how their joblessness, on how their homelessness happens. That is the population I want. And then I don't want just those people are getting in trouble. I also want the higher acuity levels. So I don't want, I'm bipolar, but I'm taking my medication, but my issue is a drug issue. And they're fine, with medication. I need some real resistant to treatment, big problems. Those are my ideal cases. And I think that's a big shift in thinking. Not everybody's comfortable with it. But again, it's the science. If I have a choice between A and B, and I can reduce the recidivism on B, the cost of the county can be saved in millions, just on that one person. You track their state prison conduct, you track the crimes, you track everything. Literally, I will tell you that on one person, I think arguably we can save you millions. And also keep this in mind, and again, this is to my general people, so when you're talking about being in jail, so understand the finances of that. If you are in jail, you don't get Medi-Cal, you don't get treatment paid for. The county pays for that. So if you're mentally ill, all of that treatment is on the county. And the cost of being in jail on the county. If you are, for instance, in a mental health court, my funding for programming, which is that FSP level, the people that are at the table, that comes from funding streams under the Mental Health Service Act. And if they're out of custody, they're accessing treatment providers by way of Medi-Cal and Medicaid. That alone, if you can add up, just think of one person. Again, in my world, I haven't done the actual math, so I really don't want to be on tape saying that I think each person I can save $1 million. But it is such a large amount of money that we're talking about in these treatment models and who's paying for it. So quite frankly, if the county would rather pay for schools and not pay to send someone to jail and I can have better success rates, I think we win with that. So that's kind of the general premise. So back to Veterans Treatment Court, you're going to get some serious cases. I got a lot of PTSD type responses. The population, without getting too specific, is going to be a lot of violence where we didn't see the violence coming. In fact, some of the assessment tools are not working as well with our group from the Veteran Treatment Court because they will just all of a sudden explode. And unfortunately, they explode at a bar after drinking with a gun because all my vets love their guns. So I do have a lot of guns, a lot of firearm offenses, a lot of violence on that, a lot of really serious cases. You're going to be dealing with serious injuries in those cases. And keep in mind two things. Keep in mind that you're going to be dealing with victims. And we want victims to be participating, knowing what's happening. So victim impact statements are part of our world. Also keep in mind that in the Veterans Treatment Court, restitution is fundamental in all of the programs, quite frankly. Restitution and paying restitution, fundamental. Cost of probation, cost of court fines and fees, that's based on ability to pay. I stay every fine and fee right from the get-go, from the very beginning, as far as being in the program, let them know. If you're not successful, those fines and fees can be imposed. If you are successful upon graduation, I'm staying those as part of your graduation. Probation costs are going to be ability to pay. The issues that are coming forward include that we're leaving people as graduates. I'm not going to look at Ms. Sendeki on this. I'm not speaking case specific, but we're leaving people as graduates, and we're finding out in our DUI and drug courts with $10,000 of debt. We want people to be self-sustaining, walking out, no recidivism rates, and all these things, and yet we're walking them out barely able to pay for housing with $10,000 of debt. So that is something, again, it's an awareness of something that we're dealing with in all these courts. But restitution in the Veterans Treatment Court is going to be ongoing. To run through how Veterans Treatment Court works, I have call me if I miss anything in this one. But the run through, and again, your court clerks are going to be able to tell you exactly what needs to be done. But that's a formal opening. So unlike the other courts, it's a very formal, you're standing there, the bailiff does a full formal opening, everybody's standing. It's very military respectful in its presentation. We start with the mentors coming up, and mentors in the military court, we are underutilizing the value of our mentors, and we are working on that because mentors are our service, they are service specific. They come up and announce their service, but they are to these mentees a voice outside of and a support outside of the court, their attorney, but someone that really knows what it means to be a veteran. And so they come up, they announce. We're finding that some of the new veterans, they're not always ready to have that support. Sometimes they need to wait, and so they're getting mentors maybe in phase 2 and phase 3. We're also getting a different generation of mentees. So as they come out from these different deployments, we're getting a different profile coming in. And it's also different because we're taking in and really recruiting out to veterans that would not have been considered before. So other than honorable, these have always been people who are eligible, but back in the day, when we were doing the Veterans Treatment Court back in the day, it was full with a wait list, and we only took combat vets because we didn't have any room for anyone else. When we stopped doing that and we started changing laws and the drug laws went into misdemeanors and we started seeing those in diversion, we changed we didn't change the criteria, we just opened it up. So it means other than honorable, even dishonorable, depending on what that related to, you are seeing an entirely different population, including some of the lifelong heroin Vietnam veterans who are coming through that we weren't seeing before, including some of the other than honorable or non-combat. And non-combat, it's still going back, whatever their crime is goes back to their service. I have an entire calendar of military sexual trauma. And I call that calendar on Tuesday morning separate from any other calendar. But those are what we're seeing in the Veterans Treatment Court. Any questions about, instead of waiting till the end, any questions about Veterans Treatment Court or military courts? Yes?
I have a question. I'm Antoinette Balta, and I work at Veterans Legal Institute. As it applies to one of my clients, I want to ask you.
We got to be non-client specific, so.
Yeah, non-client specific.
Hypothetically,
A
yes.
lot of counties don't have the benefit of having these veteran treatment courts, and they don't have a lot of military diversion options.
That's because we are so good.
Yeah, they're life-saving, and I've witnessed it firsthand so many times. What happens if a veteran commits a crime in a different county but is residing in Orange County? Is there a way you can transfer her here?
Yes. So it goes like, first of all, to the Orange County, the fact that we use the Long Beach as our VA, and we've had that established, someone go back to Judge Lindley because she was brilliant. Literally, we do a better job with our vets than Long Beach could ever. They can't touch us with this one. They keep coming down trying to figure it out. I'm like, your VA is right there in your backyard. You should be able to own this. To the county specific. Military diversion, I take active duty, deployed, out of county, out of state. I have people all over the world, it feels like, and literally in military diversion. So misdemeanors are not, because it's not probation, so it's not jurisdiction based on living in the county, it's jurisdiction based on the case. So if it's a misdemeanor, I can take any misdemeanor. Actually, if the crime is committed in Orange County, opposite to what you said, crime committed, I have jurisdiction by case. So I can handle any case no matter where they live. But to your point, which is the opposite, if they live out of county, is that what, out of county and crime committed out of county? then I don't have,
They live in Orange County, but they commit no crime.
okay, so live in Orange County, which is good, and I can do it this way. If they live in Orange County, committed the crime out of county, I have to get the case transferred over. Ms. Sandecki is a specialist in this, but the probation case has to be sent over. I've also had the opposite, where I've had out of county and committed crimes in Orange County and in, I think, Riverside. And what we did is that we did a parallel where I accepted what was happening on their Veterans Treatment Court reports as part of my VTC court, and the opposite has happened as well. So the only problem you're going to have is if I can't get jurisdiction, which misdemeanors, if they won't transfer, probation, there's a couple of hurdles. But I'm going to throw you out there, Ms. Sandecki, as the expert on the jurisdiction issues, because I think military diversion has changed, our ballgame with that. So does that help?
Yeah, thank you so much.
Okay, mental health courts. I will tell you, mental health courts have been the focus of so much of our changing best practices, everything that is happening in these courts. These courts, if you're looking at the 4 different programs, the first, whatever it takes, or WIT, and the last, which is assisted intervention, those are homeless courts as a requirement. So homeless or at risk of homelessness. And when you're looking at these courts, the difference is this. The whatever it takes court is going to be your high-risk, high-need population, so very high acuities. They're going to be very, very ill. They're also going to be very, very likely to recommit an offense. The assisted intervention program, a much smaller calendar, so if you're coming in new to mental health courts, if you're coming in as a TJ, a much easier to manage first time because there's not so many people. WIT, you walk in and it's 135 people. Last Monday I did 2 calendar calls because I could not fit everyone into the courtroom in the afternoon. So I split it up by way of probation officer, and I did a full calendar call and then a full calendar call back to back. So that's not for my new ones, that's for my seniors, I think, if you're more comfortable with those massive calendars. Assisted intervention, by contrast, is the low risk of recidivism. And when you see that population, when you go out there, you will see the difference in them. The policy is this, or the practice is, you don't want to mix your high risk and low risk, because what happens, as we know, is that if I mix my low risk people, I will make them high risk. So I take basically people that aren't going to get in trouble, and we make them worse by putting them in this group with a high risk, because that group is already getting in all kinds of trouble. So separating them out, you'll notice the difference as well, because there's oftentimes a lower level of functioning. So cognitive issues are going to perhaps keep a person out of the mental health court. If they can't do the court because of cognitive dementia, or if they're regional center, and you hear regional center as a term, if there's a reason, that's not someone that we're going to take in to the mental health courts, because their dominant issue is going to be cognitive functioning. However, when we put this group together, you're going to see a slower response. You're going to see a lot of people living with family. They're not as sophisticated in general. Sometimes you'll have the exception. Not so much of a drug use issue, but very much are they taking the medication? Are we making them and moving them towards independence, self-sustaining? And I'll get, the issue there is, you get some really serious cases, right? I have attempt murders in those cases. So know when you're walking in that in all of these courts right now, but for military diversion and the outreach court and drug court and DUI court, which is still kind of antiquated in their criteria, we have really, really serious cases. So it's a good thing to go in with that mindset, because when you hear there's a victim present, and you're not going to be looking at the charges all the time because you're looking at their progress, but keep in mind what the charges are. Also keep in mind how you're talking about that. We've had issues where one example was that, hey, so-and-so, you're in trouble on this and you're here for an attempt murder. And the whole court went quiet, because saying that in open court, while it is true and it's not a privileged issue, you really have to be careful what you're saying, right? Because that wasn't someone else that anybody else knew in the room as part of their treatment plan. So it's an awareness. Talking about charges, talking about diagnosis, talking about HIV positive, talking about transgender issues. You really have to know that I have those populations in every single court, and I've got to be, not just I've got to be, but we've got to be really hypersensitive and awareness with that. And it's part of, we have groups that are coming in on these tracks, but just keep it in mind. And you may not know what you're walking into, so keep it in mind and even more. If ever in doubt, even though it's a very interactive court that you're talking to people, keep it on the formal side. You'll never go wrong with that. It just will always keep you out of trouble, and it will always keep you in that place so that you're not opening yourself up to any kind of critique on that. The recovery court and opportunity court. Not requiring homelessness, but they have independent housing, they have insurance. I think recovery and opportunity court are some of my more difficult to manage staffing. There's struggles that go on between probation and control and treatment and control, and if treatment's not there because it's Kaiser, and I'm not going on the record saying anything negative about Kaiser, but I'd really appreciate Kaiser if you would start giving us some better interactive reports and updates. So it's a very difficult staffing situation sometimes because of strong personalities, and it's just a different environment. Lower caseloads and a lot of TAY population in the opportunity court, so I have a different level of treatment on those cases. But of the people, you've done recovery court, opportunity court, have you done either of those?
Opportunity.
What do you think, what was your impression of the teams versus, and just the environment? Lower cases, but interesting. Any words of wisdom for TJs walking into that?
Oh, it's just a lot of engagement by the staff.
Yeah, it always is. It
Yeah.
always is. Ms. Sandecki, what do you think? Any words of encouragement or tips?
What I would say to the other TJs, if you go in there and you're in doubt, you can always send a note for the real judge, because sometimes you can have very strong team members who are going to try to sway you. If you don't know what to do, you can send it over, or you can take a moment to call somebody.
I tell you what, don't ever doubt that. You never want to make a call on a case that is serious and you're looking at state prison. Just absolutely put that over. There's no decision you have to make. I absolutely agree. The strong personalities, they get in some discussions. Those discussions have led to almost physical responses. They're just engaged in what they're doing. But yes, and I think that goes for just about any calendar. If there is so much of an issue on anything, you just punt it over, not to the real judge, but to because you don't want to be responsible for that. And I think there was an issue about taking pleas. I really don't know what the resolution was on taking felony pleas. You don't have to worry about it in the misdemeanors. I didn't get a final word on taking pleas. I like the idea of taking a drug court plea that's an easy, it's all right, there's no issue. But do you really want to be in the position of taking an ESS on a state prison case where there's a debate about it? You want that all on me. It's not the real judge, it's just the judge is going to have to hold on to it. And I'll take the blame for it. I'm making decisions. You don't want to put yourself in that position of making those decisions. And I know sometimes that's not so easy, because sometimes we come in, I haven't had so many of these, but I've had TJs come in because I had conflicts with having represented people that were in the program. Those conflicts have kind of filtered out, but sometimes you are in the position of making some pretty heavy decisions. So, and if that comes around, then contacting, I think the line of communication, you call Judge Anderson if you have so much of a question, right? He is the go-to, he is the supervising judge of South Court, and if I'm not there, then he's a good resource, so just call his clerk. Yes?
The other thing I would say is you are never alone there. So
No.
if you are worried about what you're doing, there'll be somebody that has to be at the clerk, or you can call another judge. I won't keep saying real judge, but you can call somebody, you're never alone there. So even though you're isolated as far as geography, you're sitting there alone, you're not alone. So don't
No.
be afraid.
And the team will support that. They get it. They really don't want to put you in a position where you're making some call that's going to put you on the edge. We just can't take that responsibility, and you shouldn't have to. Not in courts that are so, yes,
Well, I've taken pleas in West, Collaborative Court, and CCB.
Yeah.
And a lot of times, they are controversial. That everybody knows that this person is eligible.
Right.
And of course, when you're taking a plea, it's not their first appearance.
right.
So they have discussed it with you. And I just want to
It's your call.
That that's okay to do that.
I think on those drug court cases, on the DUI court cases where it's an automatic, you know, you're gonna have an ESS, those are so cut and dry, but really, I would leave that on you. I just think there's no downside to saying, I can't do this, this is the judge's call.
Right,
And not
that's an
just
option.
because of TJ or whatever, if it's commissioner, even with my judges, we do that, right? So even the judges come in and they're like, look, this is a call that needs to be made by you, you know, or you did make, and I think that is absolutely appropriate. And not just as a kickoff, but I think you just don't want to be the one that is coming back to. You want that all on me. So I don't know what that makes me, but and that's what I mean. That's my job, right? That's if I'm making a call like that. And right now, I think with all of the heavy cases coming in, and all of the DAs coming in, and not the DAs, but the policy being looked at, are we going to take different cases? If it's going to change around, you don't want to be in that mix anyway. So, and they haven't changed the policy or the manuals, but it's a good thing to keep in mind.
What's in the ESS?
I'm sorry? ESS is an execution of suspended sentence. That means that you're saying to the person that you have, and I'll take a Monday example, you have 19 years of state prison exposure. We are accepting you into this program. There are objections because there's prior violence, there's objections because whatever it is, and we lay that out. And as you understand, you are entering a plea. I'm sentencing you to 4 years in state prison. I am suspending that sentence pending your completion of this program. That's an ESS. It happens in DUI court, so we will generally, we're looking at when we do pleas, we came at it and said, I think an open plea for someone in a mental health court was a better idea. That was when I came on board. I thought, oh, I don't like to have an ESS or someone that's mentally ill because I can't tell if they're finishing or not finishing things because of the illness. Because we see, you know, we get them stabilized and off drugs, and then the mental illness we're seeing flare, and we're realizing that we couldn't assess everything in the beginning, so I didn't want to be stuck with an ESS. However, on a drug court and DUI court and veterans court and some of these other courts, the other side of the coin is your person needs to know what they're walking into if they're not successful in the case. And I've had that blow up on me as well. So I've done open pleas, and we say, you know, this is a plea to the court. It's an open plea. You can be sentenced to the max. Well, I'm almost positive that doesn't register with the person, right? All they're thinking is, I got to get out. And what they tell me at graduation, so I'm not making this up, I need to get out because what I really want to do is use drugs, right? And that, I'm not saying that sarcastically. I'm not saying that that is a negative. I'm just saying I'm not sure that they're processing, you know, the open plea idea, which could be really dangerous. You switch a judge decides everyone gets the max, and that's how it is. That's a risk that's taken. So that communication and knowing what you're walking into can be really important.
So what decisions do we have to make here? It sounds like, I mean, obviously we're acting as judges and everything on a calendar. What decisions do we?
So you're making decisions basically on all calendars, starting with sanctions. There's 4 different things that happen that will involve decisions and findings. The first is going to be evaluations. The second is going to be sanctions. You're going to be granting motions to phase advance, and you'll be doing graduations. So those are the 4 things you have to look at. What we've talked about so far, and I've kind of embedded it in the programs, but to your question, so far I'm really talking about evaluation and pleas. And kind of some of the issues that come up with that. And they're different for each court, but that is a decision you need to make. Are you going to take a plea? Sorry. Are you going to take a plea, or are you going to put it over? And that's the first decision in an evaluation. You'll rarely make the final call on someone coming in because the public defender or the defense counsel is really not going to want a temporary judge making a final call on a disputed issue about whether someone's coming in. So that is really, you can have the discussion, flush it out. There's a lot that can be done, but you're really not making the decision. So your real decision making comes in sanctions. And that's going to be sanctions and incentives, which is probably your most important piece that you're working with because you'll have them on every single calendar. Sanctions and incentives on the military diversion program are going to be limited to that compliance, non-compliance, continue it over to have it fixed or have a termination hearing. But in all the other courts except for homeless court, you're coming in with regular calendars. So these people are walking through phases in the calendar and phases in their program, and they're going to have issues that come up across the board. The concept behind it is this. It used to be in the old days that we were like, dirty test, go to jail, right? Lie to us, go to jail. Do something wrong, break curfew, go to jail. It's like a black and white. We thought we were doing a good thing. And then the next iteration of that was we started doing graduated sanctions. All right, we'll start you off. You got a dirty test. Now you got 2 dirty tests. Now 3 dirty tests, you go to jail. It's the first dirty test, you're going to do, all-day sanction in court and an essay. Volunteer community service, third one, and we started trying to do it graduated. And then they came in and they said, no, that's not what you want to do either. When you're looking at sanctions and incentives, and you have to look at both, you first have to look at where their phase is, and then you have to talk to the team about where they are in their case plan. So the example is this. If I have someone that is a meth addict, and they will come into my court high all the time, right? It's just they're coming to court. If I have a meth addict in phase 1, that means they haven't even tackled sobriety yet. They haven't even tackled, just getting to court for them is something when you're high, right? But they're walking in, they know they're going to have a probation officer there, and they're still walking in high. Versus the person that's been in phase 3 who's had 180 days of sobriety, has gone through multiple, they've done the classes, they've done X, Y, and Z, and that person comes back having a dirty test. How do you sanction those 2 people? I'm going to ask Ms. Sandecki to weigh in on that, and why. You are getting picked on. It's good to have experts.
Someone is brand new to one of the club before programs, just the fact that they're able to get through the front doors is something to be celebrated. That they actually got there into court, and so when they test positive, you do want to teach them, of course, that using drugs is bad, but you also want to recognize that they're brand new in the program. Someone who's been in the program for a super long time and then has a relapse, that's a different issue. Because they've been in the program, because they've had all the programs, because they know the tools they're supposed to turn to instead of using, and they didn't use those sobriety tools. So the sanctions can be meted out in different ways. There can be an essay, there can be an in-court all-day sanction, there can be an overnight sanction, there can be an overnight in jail that you get to turn yourself in later and not right there in court. So kind of the team is going to, for the most part, guide you. Most teams are going to tell you this is what we usually do. If the team does not come to a consensus, you can phone a friend, like we say, you can call
Or make a call.
or you can, I'm using,
I'm giving out your phone number on the next, and mine as well, but
yeah, or you put over the real judge, but I should stop saying real judge. You can put over the judge that calls that calendar, because I also have to say, being a temporary judge, each calendar, it's run by different judges, it has its own culture. So Judge Krieger-Papa's culture is a little bit different than Judge Anderson. They're trying to standardize.
yeah.
But when you go to temporary judge, you might have teams telling you different things. Pay attention to your team. But if you're confused, you're not alone. Take a moment, step away, talk to the clerk.
I have 10 teams in my court, and each team is a different culture. So within my own courts, I can tell you that it's vastly different from one to the next.
Other guys,
Yeah, there's guidelines written and they're in the manual, but the good thing is you're going to have the team tell you, right? Now, probation generally loves custody. Treatment generally loves treatment, and so there's often a debate, and you really have to keep it simple. You are asking, really limited questions. You're asking, is this a treatment issue? Is it an addiction issue? So is it the person's addicted to heroin, I need to up their treatment in some way, I need to deal with that. Or is it a behavior issue where they come in with a dirty test and they lie? So a dirty test and the person lies and says, I'm not using. Of course, you'll see them coming in, no doubt in your mind that they're high right there, and they will tell you to your face in front of everyone, including the bailiffs, that they're not using and they've not used and they've been clean and they've been clean. The lying part of that, again, goes into the treatment. It's nuanced, but the behaviors have to be dealt with separately from the addiction issues. So it is not an easy assessment. In the back of your mind, you're looking at the team to tell you what is going to get this person to do what you want them to do. And it is going to be counterintuitive, right? It is going to be counterintuitive, especially to us that, for all of us that grew up at jail, you do this, go to jail, you do this, go to jail. And now they're saying, well, you phase 1, and they used to tell me when I started implementing this, they were saying, you're not being consistent, you're sending the wrong message. And it took retraining of entire teams And they fought me on it. I mean, I had a whole probation department fight me on this at one point. But then came around because you really have to have that nuanced assessment. Are they lying to you? Is it an addiction issue? Is it to be dealt with as a treatment issue? Is it something that that may have been dealt with one way in phase 1 when they didn't know, as opposed to phase 3, which is a different requirement? By phase 3, you should have some threshold behavior mod, right? That's part of the program. The programs are designed to go through these phases that you start with stability in phase 1. You go to making sure they're on the right medication and where they need to be with their mental health. You dry them up and get them sober, and then you really start the work. Like, you don't really know what you have until phase 2, because it takes them being sober and being on the right medication before you can even handle what the case plan is going to be. And then you start moving into the behavior mod. This is true, though, for the mental health courts, differently from vet courts, so I'll get there in a minute. But that's the progress of those phases. So it's acute stability, it's getting them on the right medication, and then you're starting with the treatment process. And not everybody, this is important because not everybody's ready for the right treatment. We used to, as judges, it used to be, and I swear they still do this, so if they do, stop them. It used to be, well, we'll give you this, put this over for 2 weeks, and then in 2 weeks we're going to have you do 10 AA meetings and then come back. Well, now we know different. You know, if they're a trauma history and they're not in the right setting, it could be contraindicated on all fronts to send them to AA. In fact, it could be triggering. So I need to have the stability, I need to have the medication, and then I really need a treatment assessment. Are they trauma-based? Are they high trauma-based? Does that qualify for the VA, for PTSD? Trauma, right? Trauma, what's happening with their brain with trauma? Is it a therapy base? What is the therapy? Is it the therapy behavior mod? Because it used to be too, we used to not take jerks, right? There's just not a better word for it. They used to be like, oh, they have, and I still hear this, so I have to be careful in my mocking, but oh, they have a personality disorder. I'm like, I got news for you. I don't have one of them that doesn't have a personality disorder. I don't think anyone comes into collaborative court without a personality disorder. But the changing that behavior, those CBT, MRT, all the cognitive behavior therapies, EMDR, some of the work being done at the VA is phenomenal, but those actual modularized behavior changes, those are changing our county. I mean, that jerk who's going to get in more trouble than anyone you can imagine, not because of their mental health, not because of their drug addiction, but just because of how they process and their decisions, that's a population that we absolutely are addressing, and we have to address it. So that happens phase 3. It's not until late phase 3, sometimes phase 4, but late phase 3 where we start seeing a shift. And no one should joke or kid themselves into thinking that everybody comes into the program thinking they're going to be sober and clean and they're going to change their life. In fact, I think the lowest percentage actually walk in. They will tell me, and they'll be completely honest, graduation after graduation, I took your program, and they say my program like I own it somehow. I took your program because I want to get out of custody because I want to use. And they will, I see that across the board, every single program. So that idea that they weren't going to use before, they're getting out because they want to use. They're addicts. It's not going to be until I change and stabilize and get where I need that I'm actually going to see a change. The gift or the true goal of the programs is I've got to get them, and it's a short time frame. I'm looking to get someone that is pre-contemplative about drug change or use to it's their idea and they own it and this is the life that they want within 18 months. And that is not an easy sell, right? These are lifelong issues of trauma that, we're just now the first ones to scratch the surface. But that's exactly what we're doing. So by phase 3, you see a whole different ballgame. You see people who are coming in and they've never had stability, first of all. There's a group of those. They've never dealt with any of the underlying issues, including family issues. We brought family into the regimen of what the long-term treatment plan is. And once you start seeing that shift, it's remarkable. I don't know if you recognize it. I'm sure you've seen it. My seniors who do that, because I shouldn't say seniors, I should say experts. We'll call it experts, sounds better. Because you see these people and you wouldn't believe, if you come to a graduation and you just see a person at phase 5, you would not believe the person that you're seeing, because it's not until you see the person from phase 1, who we call in legal terms a hot mess, getting arrested every 5 minutes, right? It's a legal term. And they literally are a hot mess. They come in high, they come in, they're just, they're all just an absolute, they're not doing anything. You see that person graduate, you wouldn't recognize them. And they have actually just completely changed what their goals are for themselves. And it's an incredible, it's not, 100%, but boy, when it happens, it is nothing short of amazing. And this is homeless for 20 years. I've got my graduates who are living under the overpass, and their stories sometimes, the stories, you have to be prepared. You have to be prepared for some of the secondary trauma that comes in with it, because you get in those calendars and you get used to calling the calendars, and it's that interface, and you're doing well, but you hit a couple graduations, and the graduations start out, and I've had my POs now kind of give me the heads up before we do this, because I'm not prepared for them to just give up information that I didn't think was necessarily going to be part of the graduation. But they are there, and it's their graduation. So when the graduate comes in and says, I have been a heroin addict for 30 years. I started heroin at age 14 after being molested by my uncle, who also molested my 2 sisters. I now have 3 kids, and the series of events that happened. And when I started using again is because when that uncle started to prey on the 3 daughters. By the way, the 3 daughters were sitting up in front of me at the graduation, and you're watching this like cyclical trauma, generational impact, and these women that were in there, and it was all women up there who had been there. That is not an unusual example, which is unfortunate, and it is something to be aware of, because that trauma and that secondary trauma and hearing that, that's a lot to handle. It's a lot for the team to handle, it's a lot for you to handle, and if you're not in there on a regular basis, if you're doing a graduation, it's worth keeping an eye on. It's also worth just keeping an eye on that, because you may be walking in not hearing that when you're dealing with the phase 3. The team will know that, but you're really walking in at the phase 3 part, and you're just kind of hearing how they're doing right now. But those backgrounds of those people are, they're stories that you just couldn't write. You couldn't make that stuff up. I mean, the stuff that they come in with. So secondary trauma, going into phases. Phase 5 should be in aftercare, and graduations are probably the best thing that you'll do. And you will do graduations. So walking through graduations before getting to the team, walking through graduation looks like this. And it's a concept for any program. It will vary between styles. I am so jealous of Judge Anderson. He is the judge again down in South Court and Harbor Court. He does roses, he does guitar, he has the booking photo up, and then the after, graduation. I think they have graduation gowns. I mock him to the extent, of course, and I've got 10, but even that's not working. He is exceptional at doing these graduations. So I don't do graduations like that, but if you ever do South Court, which you'll probably not have a TJ do because he's going to do it himself, but that is the gold standard. So the graduation comes in, and there's variances. I've changed over for CCB1. I've started calling graduations first, because it gets those people are there all day and they're waiting, and so calling graduation first, just as a process, worked well. So I call the person up. The judge is the one that starts the conversation, and you don't want to go into the details of whatever their personal story is, but you really have to talk about, and the team will give you this information, and you can talk about it as an amazed judge coming in, not seeing the whole story, only seeing this beautiful thing that's happening here. And you can really, even though you weren't there for all stages, you can really make it, with the team's help, you can put some details in there that will, it's an art form, but it's really, think of what it is for them that day, and it's worth putting in some time. Telling them, what it is, because you're dismissing charges, and you don't have to go through the details of charges, but letting them know, I'm here, and it's an honor to be the person that's going to be here to be able to listen to this motion and everything that came to dismiss these charges. Because in almost all collaborative courts, you are looking at a dismissal motion for the entire case. So, and that's already been pre-established, and the DA's already gone through it. We should have already talked about that before you even get it. But you will be doing graduations, and that dismissal, again, it's a stipulation, so you're taking stipulations. They'll cover you on the minute order on that. But the graduation itself it starts with you. So once you get there, and once the person is up, and they're all nervous in the well, I shake their hand, because I swear that they're barely breathing sometimes, and I got to calm them down. And then I do this. This is my style. It's you can do whatever you want on this. I literally get boxes of Kleenex out because I know what's coming, and I put the box out for my staff, because if it's one that they're going to cry, then I got them going. And people watch me sometimes, not in the veteran treatment court, by the way, but people watch me as I start putting out my Kleenex boxes, because we know it's coming. Know ahead of time whether the family's going to be there or the support, because you don't want to, say, can you bring your support staff up? The person may be the only person in the world that's there, and it's just the team and everyone else. Then we have all, like in the Veterans Court, we're going to have veteran support from the mentors come up. You're going to have the team discuss. I normally start with introducing family and support, having the family have an opportunity to talk to the graduate or to the participants. I know you're gonna think this is just a hug it out court, which in some ways it is, and it is kind of it is different than what we do as judges, but there's a lot behind it. So letting the family talk, and if you can get past mom, who I can normally not get past mom, because by mom, they start talking about how they were and what's changed and losing their kid and this. And if you can make it through mom and you're not using the Kleenex, then wait for dad. Because every time I think mom's got the story. And if mom and dad don't do it, the ones that get me are the kids. I don't even want to call them up half the time, because you've got these 15-year-old kids that have seen more in their life in dealing with this parent going through whatever it has been than you could possibly ask someone to deal with in a lifetime themselves. And you start thinking about the generational impact that this is having. So if you make it through mom, dad, kid, and significant other, and you're still not using the Kleenex yourself, the next step is, how long do I have? Do you know? Oh, I can talk faster than that, so. So if you can make it through there, then it goes to the team. So team, we'll be here at 8 o'clock at night, and we'll give you double credits. The team then goes through, and you, if you're just coming in, you'll get an eye of what has changed, because they'll talk about the hiccups, they'll talk about the arrests, they'll talk about those times in court where they battle, and sometimes they come in and they're so angry that they're ready to take on the judge, which always goes poorly, and are normally hooked up with my bailiffs. But they'll talk about all of those things, and then the person reads their essay, and the essay itself will address, what their plan is, where they came from. Those essays some of those essays are amazing. And if you are in my court, please save them, because I like to read what their essays are. They speak a story that you couldn't say that story. And then the motion from the public defender and or defense counsel. So once they've read their essay, they ask to be graduated, you literally come down off the bench. That's not something we make up. These are best practices, like this engagement of actually being down and having the eye to eye. And then you thank them from the team, and you call the team, their entire team, the team that's in CCV1, their entire team. Talk about being proud of them. You don't have to go into details. Talk about it being an honor to be that person that is able to do this, and then proceed with the certificate, which is a commencement, not a graduation, which I still am not very good at saying. And then present them the certificate. Lots of clapping. If you haven't been there, it's a lot of clapping in that court. And then you go back on the bench, and the public defender and or defense counsel will make the motion to dismiss, at which point you grant the motion. Again, it's already been pre-discussed with the team. There should not be any debate or any issues in front of the whole team. Everybody standing ovation, we clap, and then the person's off, everyone's cheering for them, and then we get back to business. We normally then go through the compliance list, go through the progress reviews. I do progress reviews intentionally per practice You start with phase 5 generally because you see the people doing really well. And the reason you do that is in some courts we let the phase 5 go. You'll get that recommendation from probation. Because phase 5, they should have jobs, right? So drug court, generally phase 5, I want them out the door. But they also need to have their story, so the phase 1s are kind of hearing it. Because you have to understand that those progress reviews are not really progress reviews. Those progress reviews are actually a learning situation that is designed as such. So the phase 1s who are still struggling with getting to their appointments are listening to their phase 5s and 4s, to their struggles, to what problems they're walking into, and they learn from that as well. So you walk through phase 5, phase 4, phase 3, phase 2, phase 1. You can do sanctions first, or you can do sanctions intermittent within. When you do it, you'll see the difference. Phase 1, again, goes back to being the hot mess. All of them generally are hot mess in phase 1. Phase 2 struggles, a lot of sanctions sometimes, but you'll learn a lot just by calling the calendar on how that progresses. So phases. So any questions? Graduations, phases, calling calendar. Yes.
What do you do on dilute tests now?
Oh, dilute tests are interesting. I know Defense Counsel loves this one. The science on dilutes is this. A dilute is a dirty. It is an absolute dirty. It is fundamentally, and there are medical issues, there are issues that come through, but it is sanctioned as a dirty. They go back to the creatine levels, and we've gone back and forth. I've had the public defenders take those classes when we go back to NADCP. Do not get into a debate about it. It is a dirty. That's just all you have to know. A dilute test is a dirty test, and it is treated as such. There's medical issues that are going on. Normally we have a pre-update on that, and I know Defense Counsel who's here, who a couple have cases in here, love to hear me say dilutes are dirties, but dilutes are dirties. Do you want to go into the science, or probably not?
No, I just know when I did CCB1, we treated it as a dirty test. Sanctions were the same as a dirty
Absolutely.
test. Then I went to West Court, and I think in DUI or drug court, they changed it to treat dilutes, the first dilute, and we didn't say it's not a dirty test. We just sanctioned it differently.
That makes
We've been giving them an essay on a first dilute,
Well, the question
but not distinguishing between a dilute and a dirty.
So I think that makes sense. If it was a dirty, would you do an essay as well? Because that makes sense as well. I don't think you sanction any differently, although if you have a dilute and the person is absolutely in denial, I don't force it out in that context. The sanction is the sanction. Sometimes I try, because what I'm looking for, and what I will do on occasion is, if the person, some are on the fence, and my team has to tell me this. I have a person on the fence. This is normally, picture a TAY, transitional age youth. They're not quite, no one's quite ready to walk into a courtroom and say to a judge, oh, by the way, I just used. It's just not their first go-to. So we're trying to get, so the behavior I'm looking for is that honesty. What is going to get them to do that? And if my team endorses it, because I don't know treatment-wise where they are, but if my team says, look, they're on the fence, and they'll admit to you, we think we can get them to admit it. If I can get that team to get them to admit it, and that person comes in, and you can see them, and they struggle, like they physically struggle, and they're a mess, because they don't want to admit to a judge that they're using. But if they do, I've actually told them, well, it was an overnight, but that is changing, because the honesty portion is what I'm looking for. Can't treat you unless you're honest, so if I'm looking for honesty, what am I going to get? And then I go to a day sanction, or, so it's the whole idea behind the sanction. I think the best rule of thumb is, what's the best way to get them to do what you want them to do? And that's not always going to be, the old school, so, yes.
Okay, so I'm new to this area.
Okay.
My question is, anything we do, are the appealable issues gone when they come into collaborative court? Or
Collaborative courts are, there are appealable issues, right? Especially when you get into sentencing and some of that. But it's kind of, it's a voluntary program, right? And so collaborative courts, and this goes back to our team approach in a second, but the whole idea is that there's a buy-in. So everybody's giving a little bit, right? This is not a typical environment, and for some it's so different. So when you do that, many of those issues are self-resolved because you volunteer for the test to be shared and the information to be shared by the team, and this discussion. This is something that if they're not aware of it or if they're not paying attention when they come in, once they see the teams, they know because as a general rule, it's going to be me and the participant. That's how it should be. It should be one-on-one judge and participant. If it's you coming in as a TJ, I would say you ask probation, okay, probation, what are the updates? Treatment, what are the updates? Because that's the old school way of doing it. And that way you're getting the information. But the ideal method is for the judge to be doing this one-on-one, 3 minutes a person. I don't know why they came up with that, but so does that kind of
So I'm
answer the
just
question?
curious, like, if we're issuing the sanctions or something like that, is that something that?
No, because it's optional. They can opt out of the program if they opt out of the program.
And they end up back in regular court?
No, if they opt out of the program outside of the window, they end up sentencing in my court. So,
Oh, okay.
and I
So
know
once
for-
they're in, they either
well,
do their sentence or they finish the program?
once they're in, we have a window, and it's different for each program. So the window means in the beginning of the program, like we were talking before, I don't really know what I have with some of these situations, and the treatment team doesn't. We don't know, is it drug-induced psychosis as a primary, and then what is the secondary, and where's the trauma coming in? Oh, by the way, what are the cultural tracks that we're dealing with? So you've got like a big old puzzle in front of you. So in the mental health courts, it's a 45-day window. If they decide, oh my gosh, this is way more than I bargained for, they withdraw their plea, they're back in the original court, no harm, no foul. It's a little difficult because oftentimes they're going back into custody, so it's kind of hard. Rarely are you going to have a situation, and it used to be that we had, if new stuff came up, we could kick them out of the program. That has been long since debunked as far as a practice because, fine, we find out that you're a gang member, even currently, or we find out something recent, right? You're in treatment now. What am I going to pull you out and send you back over because you didn't give us a full statement? I mean, there's arguments to be made that yes, we should do it, but once they're in, they're ours, is the general rule. Absent something really, big coming in. But to be ours, they have to have that window to be able to opt out, so.
Does that window take care of competency issues?
No, competency is an issue that we can deal with all the way through. And competency, you will see the issues in the mental health court. So I have many cases right now where competency and conservatorships have been put into effect while in program. We knew what we were walking in with that, and it's interesting. It's a really interesting conflict with the Public Defender's Office, right? Because they represent on the 5150 LPS conservatorships, and that's hard. And it's hard to have someone 5150. That's the other problem. My biggest issue with my mental health courts, I have people that are not, they're competent, right? They're not 1368. They're not meeting the threshold of not competent, but they should be on conservatorship. They're gravely disabled. There's no doubt. We can't get the county to do it. I mean, I've got all those numbers right at hand. They will not keep them on a 5150. That's a whole different realm of issues. So.
There's something in between.
Yeah, and that's normally our cases, right? So on any given Monday, Mondays are not a particularly easy day of the week for us, right? Because, Monday morning is, Thursday morning are good. The meth, I've got meth and I've used meth for 20 years and now I'm in trouble. And Monday morning is, I'm 22 years old, I have a high trauma background, there's cultural issues, I'm a dual diagnosis, I don't know that, I was diagnosed as schizophrenic with my first break, but I don't believe I'm schizophrenic, and by the way, I'm transitional age youth, so I don't want to believe I'm mentally ill. I don't want to take medication, and I've been using cocaine of all things. I thought cocaine is like the 80s, but now they're coming back with cocaine. So, or worse, some injury. I mean, I'm schizophrenic and I'm an opioid user. Now that's a Monday morning, that's just a Monday morning eval for a day. Yes?
The one thing she brought up about terminations and opting out, those really should be put over for the regular judge, just,
Right.
That just makes it easy.
It's not even easy. Yeah, no, it's not even easy or not easy. It's that you may have to have them put into custody, and we'll talk about that in a second, especially for CCB1. But the call is, there's so much going into it, right? And you have normal human nature. I have providers, they get tired. Like they are frustrated, they're banging their head against this person. They're like, I want them terminated. You need to kind of see what's going on and have the true analysis. Is this someone that's having, Is it a relapse? Is it someone that's not ready? And we're not always right on those, so really putting thought into it and having it go through that analysis, even if we're wrong, is really important. So, and I will sanction people and then have them come back for termination, because when they're really frustrated, they know they're going into custody, they kind of have tantrums. I have a lot of tantrums in that court. You'd be surprised. I have tantrums on parents, I have tantrums all the time, tantrums with people in that court. Because they get frustrated, and especially if they're using or they relapse or they go off their medication. The behavioral issues and actively symptomatic is something you need to get used to, right? I am absolutely, you're going to have actively symptomatic people in the court. So is that someone you want to terminate, or do we want to bring them back after we've gotten some injections and seen where we're going?
Logistically on that, if they're near, let's use the 45-day one, just because you threw that out there.
And then you
If they're
just-
on day 44, can we extend the 45?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Stay, and that won't even be an issue. If there's an issue and it's day 43, I will by default. I mean, if we're right on the line, I don't want to force that issue so much.
So we can
So,
extend that, it's not,
yes,
okay.
yes. So I'm going off track a little bit.
Sorry.
No, mine, it makes sense, but the team approach, it goes back, I know my experts in the room are used to this, but know that you're dealing with members from every single stakeholder. So you've got probation, who doesn't think like healthcare, who doesn't think like the public defender, who doesn't think like private counsel, who doesn't think like the DA. And you're asking all these groups to come into a room and make a decision. So it's an extraordinary experience when you do it and it's done right, but it can go sideways on you fast. It's fair enough. Because temperaments and big stakes, right, come into play. And so it's oftentimes big stakes that are coming mixed messages from their supervisors and for instance, probation. Probation will come in. These courts are worth millions of dollars in funding streams, right? So when you look at this, think of yourself as walking into a corporation where you have millions of dollars coming into each funding stream, and you have different competing interests within the county that are going to have their own reasons for doing things. So just if you think everyone's being straight up with you, just take a step back, because AB 109 money, multi-million dollars, and I'm asking to take over AB 109 reentry courts. I'm like, this obviously is a court that we should have. But think of the interests. Probation is naturally going to be wanting to be in control of that money, and so that's an interest for them. It may be an interest too when they say things like, oh, judge, that's high control, they're too blah, blah, blah. I can tell you right now, if you ever hear the word high control, just say no. I absolutely take high control. In fact, I want them to for high control. So things like that, don't really respond. I'm just kind of giving you a broader base there. But understand there's bigger issues, right, that are coming in. So leave those issues for me, or whoever the judge is. But know that they're there, and know that you're not always getting at face value what a certain situation is. The DA is changing. One day my DA was saying one thing, the next thing the DA was saying something else. I was like, what happened on this? But there's a whole changeover in the DA's office. It could broaden the spectrum of what we do in collaborative courts in general. It could not. I'm not sure what the end game will be. But again, different interests. Public Defender's Office, as a big picture item, I want law enforcement to be at the table. Public Defender's Office and defense attorneys in general are going to be like, why would you bring a cop into this setting, right? But there's interest that we're looking at that I really need to pilot and see. So there's HIPAA protections, and there's MOUs, and there's all these things, but everybody, the point is everyone's coming in kind of with their own separate interests involved. So teams. So team, every team is going to be different. I'm going to list, my new project has been that we've taken pictures of the team members. I put the team members for each team. I have. You would joke because I got 10 teams. I can't say this is happening in the outer courts, but when you come into CCB1, the new plan is that you will have your team, pictures of who they are and what they do, so you know, including my bailiffs and everyone else in the courtroom, because it's a lot of people. One team is 10 people, and then you've got the whole court staff. So you'll have that entire group and their supervisor right in front of you. So you can really, you'll know who they are. So when you're on the bench, I always just say probation or treatment, and I don't think you need to worry about it, but it's nice to know their name. And every single program is going to have a different level. So psychiatrists are going to be involved in the veteran treatment court. Psychiatrists are on board with the AI court. The larger courts are going to have full service partners. So you will get into arenas where I have multiple providers, as many as 12 people in the room from 12 different agencies. And you'll also have private counsel coming in and different people coming in. They'll sign waivers. The coordinator will take care of everything. So not your responsibility, just kind of an awareness of that. One of the things that we need to talk about specifically is if you come into CCB1 is the transport issue. Transport for CCB1. So if you haven't been there, if you have, this is CCB1. It is, if you look to the left, my transport for in custody comes through this little doorway, and they literally, and here are my clerks, and they walk down, and then they're here. I can only take about 6 people in there, and back in the day, I mean, when we were in that court, they made arrangements for us. We used to line them up like the chain gang. I used to have like 15 people waiting for evaluations. The sheriff said, yeah, that's not gonna work. It also was not conducive to having an interview. I have doctors asking about high trauma on evals. I can't do that in here. So the eval process itself, and cover in CCB1, I don't care what the calendar is, your first priority is going to be interrupt everything, call the in custody. And you'll have the super clerks tell you they're ready to go. You literally just drop everything and move over. Mid-calendar, anything but a graduation. Mid-calendar over to take care of those. Also, if you're back in staffing, think of it as herding wild cats, because everyone has other things and they have people to talk to and there's evals. You can use your bailiffs to herd the wild cats, but wild cats into the courtroom, sometimes I literally am pulling people into the courtroom with me, but you have to get those calendar cases called. So just know they're going to be expecting you to be there 8:30, 1:30 at the table, calling them. If they're not there ready to go, call it anyway, in the sense of staffing. You really got to keep these calendars moving, and so just know that there's a lot of people that you'll be like, watching, so to speak. Anything else? What do you think? Anything else on CCB1 as a location? Anything else that comes up tip-wise to my people who've worked CCB1?
Well,
Yeah.
Where do we park?
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say.
Oh, you know what? You always park. I always park in.
21.
It's 22. 22 is mine, right? 23. The problem is I've been there so many times when you're coming in. If it's prepping for, especially for the outreach court, I think that I think it should always be A. If it's not A and 23 is open, park in that spot. Don't worry about me whatsoever, because I can find spots. So A is the first spot. That's the side closest to OSHA. You know what I'm talking about? So if you're coming in, do you know where I am? Where I'm talking about? Next to the side door going in, your badges will do that. If you're parking in the parking lot and you come in off of Main Street and you're on your left is A, B, C, and D, A is the court spot. Worst case scenario, let's say people are parked everywhere. When you go up and there's the sheriff's spots, just use that to go in and get and get the pass from the clerk. So worst case scenario, don't park in the parking, because those tickets are like $50. So good question.
And then as far as coming in, I just walk through the front door and knock, and somebody will answer.
Do you have badges?
No.
Oh, they won't. Oh.
We don't have badges, we
Oh.
go through security.
Oh.
And then I walk through all the defendants, and I bring my own robe, but.
You can always use my robe.
I know.
I have, if you don't have a robe, I come in this door, so if they know you're coming too, we could have them meet you out there. You just have to be careful.
You can call the clerk
Yeah,
on the phone
right.
and just
And say, "I'm here."
Outside the door too, but, yeah, we don't have passes to get in that side door.
I would tend to call the clerk. I'd rather have you go through the side door and have the clerk bring you in than I would have you go through all security, because there's a lot going on out there. Yeah, so that would be a preference. The 5801 we'll always get Maria. So it's the 58 is the it's 6258 is the CCB1. So 5801.
657.
Yes, 622 657 58. Yeah, 5801. So I would always call Maria, and then they'll take you through here. If there's a red light flashing, it means they're transporting inmates. So don't open the door then.
Right.
Then you can go in the back here and walk all the way back to chambers. Also, some safety things that you need to be aware of if you're in CCB1. So this panel is bulletproof, so you know that. The escape door, which I think I was there 4 or 5 months before I ever knew it. That panel right there, that's kind of, you can see how it's offset. That panel you can just push right through, and yeah, it's all this time. The deputies there now, those deputies are trained. We've gone through a series of deputies. CCB1 is not for every deputy, and it can be a lot, and we've had a lot of different temperaments come in there. And if you have the wrong temperament that doesn't understand someone who's really, really ill, and they're perceiving something that's happening even back here, and they're not aware of it, it can escalate faster than anything you can imagine. And this whole population is prone to, or you could have something going on really, really fast in there. So I have 2 transport deputies and I have 2 actual deputies in the courtroom, and then we have the 2 SSOs in the front. I never know what's going on with SSOs. I don't pay attention to that necessarily. But my deputies, Street is the one who's over in the corner there. One of the best I've seen. Absolutely aware, handles that population extremely well. You could have in your calendar court people who are sitting here with Street on the, we call it deputy Street calendar. So I do sanctions, and sanctions may include staying with the deputy for the day and watching it in the court. So if you come out, you may be aware that there's people in the front there. So Deputy Street will call a calendar. He's the one that brings the family in. He's the one that's kind of gearing everything. We do it in shifts, not because we want it to be private, but because I want to get my in-custodies in and out for safety issues. And then I want to open the court up to the full calendar. So he makes sure all the right family, everybody's where they're supposed to be. Deputy Chavez over here, also really, really good. He will hand out a Deputy Chavez calendar. He will hand out coins. He will shake their hand. He is also perhaps the nicest person in the world, also to the people coming in, and just really sets a tone. He's also setting the tone for the inmates coming in and out. If you see them coming in the red jumpsuit, know that there's potentially issues that they've been having at the jail. So there's going to be a high visibility on that, and they're going to be watching that. If they're very sensitive with the security issues, because what they don't know, and you should know, is when you would walk out this door to the door that you will be coming in and the clerk will get you, that is also one of the most vulnerable issues for escape that we have in the building. So they're walking out, the back area is the loading dock, so it's Old Butham's building. And as they're walking back, there's a door to the side. They just need to pump that door. They just don't know it, and it has a big dog in front of it. So they haven't gone there yet. So just be aware of how sensitive coming in and out, and red jumpsuits or active, you'll sense it. If they're actively symptomatic, you're going to want to handle that sooner than later, because they're going to want to get it back. If you have an ADA and or someone that is really having physical issues and or so, sometimes they're just so ill. Sometimes they'll have issues that they're in jumpsuits. Sometimes, like the paper suits, or there's all kinds of things going on. But if there's ADA compliance, so issues with limbs or issues with walking, you may be asked to go to CCB2, which is what I call the loading dock. And literally what we do is the court reporter goes out there, the DA goes out there, the bailiffs go out there, and everyone goes out to the loading dock, and I call the case from the loading dock with the person still in the car. We have to be accessible to that, and so I don't think it's uncommon. Other issues that may arise in the courtroom, not necessarily in the courtroom, but to the same issue of people who aren't transported. The transport lists that come in, especially now that people are fighting to get into our courts, the transport lists, sometimes I'll have 6 transports in a day. And literally, this is more transports for some courts than we see in North Court, like all together. And there's no real holding cell except for this one. So they have to go one at a time, and they transport. So when you have those transport issues, and you can be on top of it as any person, calling those cases, getting them out, you may still have issues with not transporting everyone. what happens is the discussion comes up with public defender or defense counsel, because some cases may be able to trail until the next day, some cases may need priority. Give that up to the attorneys, because you can't really call that, and you don't want to put someone in a situation where they need to be a time waiver or something. Let the attorneys kind of assess the situation. It's kind of an understanding that we're going to take as many people, transport them as humanly possible, so we're not going to set limits, so they're pretty good with working with us with those transports, but it's a difficult situation. Another issue that comes up is I have people who are on hold, like med hold, suicide hold, watching. They won't be transported over. So there's and you will have the you'll have the little brief that says what you need to say just to continue the case over. But definitely use the attorney to decide what's the best response, because they may go over to the jail and may be able to make an appearance for that person without transporting. They may say it is an emergency, we've got to get them over tomorrow. So just kind of work through that, but know that it's one of the banes of my existence is having that transport issue, but it's workable. So transport issues are always an issue. Let me see what I have. What time court start? Oh, that'd be one. I have one courtroom. 10
Nine calendars in the sense that.
10 calendars.
10 calendars, but they're different
Yes,
topics.
and 10 teams
Well,
If I-
in corporate.
in one courtroom. And arguably one job, but if you know that if you watch my experts here, it's not really one job or one court, because I utilize TJs. I have been utilizing TJs for homeless outreach almost exclusively for a couple of months. I use TJs probably more than any court because they've designated more judges, and the expansion is part of something that the county is looking at as expanding into 3 different courts off-site. But that's a huge proposal, which who knows what the time frame is. So this is what we've got for now. This is, and I tried to, not to your question, I didn't want to give you my calendar that showed all the colors, because if you figured out what I'm doing in the morning and the afternoon and you look at that color, it makes your head explode. So this is an easier presentation of just what your calendar looks like. And they'll have the calendar, they'll have the calendar manual, you'll have the list of people on your team, you'll have the bench book that I'm working on, you'll have the documents that show what you have to go through if you did a plea. All of that would be part of what we're going to have for you. But this is just kind of an overview of how the week works. So on a given week, every Monday is dedicated to WIT. In the morning, it's fully dedicated to assessments, evals, and staffing with the team. It's such a large calendar that it takes us, we start at 8:30, and I mean, we are sitting down working at 8:30, and it goes all the way to noon. Every single part of that, you have private counsel coming in, you have in custodies coming in, so it's an up and down, evals are being done, but the morning is one of our busiest work times. The afternoon is we call the calendar exactly 1:30, so we walk out. Normally I have it in custody, they have to be first, but the idea is I don't want people waiting for those calendars to be called, because that is just time that bothers me to my soul, that they're out there, waiting for us to staff on a case. So the idea with WIT is you get them in and you get them into your courtroom as fast as possible. I even like having the calendars with in custodies, because there's a value, everything that's happening is a value to participants. Seeing participants in custody, or in custody participants seeing what's happening to graduates, that if I had the ideal world, I'd keep my in-custodies in there all day long, because to watch the court is to understand it better than any attorney or anyone else can explain to them. On Tuesdays, it looks like such a light day, because it's pleas and it's cases that are coming. My clerks think that is the busiest morning we have, even busier than the staffing on WIT, because every case in every court, every program, everything's happening. Sentencing cases, we are putting cases on for evaluation, someone gets taken into custody and we're looking for a new case plan. Everything that's going to happen in your world is going to happen on Tuesday. So avoid Tuesday mornings if you're TJ, it's just too much work. Veterans Treatment Court, we start Veterans Treatment Court at 1:30. We're looking to talk about having the Veterans Treatment Court staffing a little earlier, because it's just, we still have the people coming in for the participants coming in at 2:30, but sometimes it takes more time to be doing the evaluation. So we're assessing that. But every Tuesday at 1:30, team members start meeting at 1:30 in chambers. There's another staffing going on in the back conference room, so chambers. We alternate one week to the next as to evaluations and full calendars. So I want to see new participants at a minimum of every other week. If they're having issues, I'll have them come in on a Tuesday afternoon as well. Also, military sexual trauma calendar. It's limited. It is one of, I think, it's one of our best calendars actually. Some of the best work that's being done. Right now it's all female, but I have a number of participants who are that are part of the military sexual trauma, also males. On the males, we let them designate where they're going to go. If they're male combat, sometimes they want to keep on the combat track. Some of the male MST people have come in and wanted to be on the MST calendar. MST calendar, even though it's not shown here, is 8:30 in the morning on a Tuesday. So I don't even want them in the same room with the veterans coming in the afternoon. I want them on a completely different track. We also are looking at having, I don't think I have any females in the regular combat vet court right now. So they're looking and assessing from the national and do we separate out female specific tracks, and that's something that they're looking at doing across the board because female, male, like all males together in counseling or groups, all females is kind of the way we're looking at. Recovery court, opportunity court means that we're going to have a mental court, health court every day on Wednesday morning. It is it's again, busy one, the one where the team is kind of a little bit, it's a little more hectic on some ends, but it's a good calendar in that it's not a large calendar. It goes very fast. There's a lot of progress going on in that track, and it is probably like the second level if you're going to do a mental health calendar. Save WIT until you've done a couple cases, because WIT, you got to be ready for WIT. So recovery court, opportunity court is a good precursor to WIT. Wednesday afternoon, and they should put this, I don't know why she didn't put homeless outreach as an absolute full court, because, I've got about, 400 or 500 people in that homeless outreach court. That court is a perfect court to start in. If you are coming in from civil or if you don't have the criminal experience. It's a high volume court, but it's an all carrot, no stick. And it's not the same collaboration that you don't go back and have some big staffing with really high level treatment. What you do is you come out and you announce the service providers, and they give you a list, and you start the calendar late because the whole idea is to order everyone back at 1:30. We don't call the calendar until 3. The work that's being done in that particular court is all the work that's being done in the hallways, right? The doctors are there, SSI, driver's license, mental health, vaccinations, who else is there? Child support services.
Treatment, Mariposa.
Mariposa's in there, the volunteer community service, vets. Veterans are always out there. Who is that?
Legal Aid.
Legal Aid is out there. Orange County Bar Association is looking to be out and having a spot in the office buildings out there, but they combine the providers who are there. So the VA, Voc Rehab, all the providers that are housed on site are there, and then they add everything else in the county comes in to, they kind of come in and they overtake the whole group, and they make sure, the public defenders make sure that everyone has everything they need to do. So by the time your calendar is called, they've been assessed, they have what they need to do. The DA's already run them through for graduations. If you graduate, you're dismissing these tickets. It is an unbelievably successful program for people who want to engage. Now, there's a homeless population that doesn't want engagement. We're not there to make them engage in this population. We are there to just be a court that, if you're going to pull, we're asking you to get housing, job, or income, and volunteer community service. And I can tell you right now, it's blood from a turnip if you think you're going to get money on these tickets. So the amount of you think of what you're doing to the county, it costs a lot just to process those tickets. I mean, it's crazy that these tickets are going in and out, in and out. And these people are coming in and they've changed everything. So to dismiss a ticket, have at it. It's the most fun you'll have it as a judge, and they have done a lot to get there. Yes?
For homeless court, do we volunteer at 1:30 to 4:30, or do we go in at 8 o'clock? I'm a little confused as to the time expected.
2:30. 2:30, that way if there's anything that needs to be done and it needs to start earlier, 2:30 you'll be done by, arguably you'll be done by 3:30, but probably 4. So it's a limited commitment. Would you agree with that on my, it's a limited commitment, it's very fast. You intro all the, the process is you intro the providers, everyone claps for the providers. When in doubt, just clap in that court, right? So, you intro and then you draw numbers, so everyone that's there gets a number. I have one of my TJs who's not here today, he comes in with like 40 gift cards for, right? $5 gift cards for, Burger King or something, I don't know what it is. But we have gift cards, and so we do drawings for the gift cards, or he comes in and gives anyone that shows up the gift cards. It's a very positive experience. Anytime you're feeling down about what's happening in the county and you think, oh my gosh, everything in the county is just a mess, go in there because, again, you get the positive stories, these successes, and there's very little. The only secret to it is if we have someone that's fallen off the radar, the public defenders will invite back. It's code. I don't generally have in custody matters there. Why there's a homeless? Because it's an environment that, it's years of engagement, right? It starts with Lindley, and it's been something that was cultivated that this is a spot where you're going to get services. It has, now it's 10 years in, 11 years in that, and it is definitely something that you're working to, keep up. So when they say invite back, that's a bench warrant, and clerks already know that. No one has to say anything. One thing for my people who are doing that court right now, one, I want to change the name. I went in front of the steering committee. It should be outreach court. I'm tired of homeless court. I just don't like the implication. I like outreach court better. 2 is the DAs are now present, which at first I was like, oh, what's that going to mean? But really what they're trying to do, in part, I'm not going to say really what they're trying to do. I'm never going to speak for Mr. Spitzer and what he's trying to do. But I will say that they are opening up to higher cases, and so it's so easy if you're a judge in there because you just default to the DA. Are you okay with that? Is that good? Everything comes in, and it really is a lot better for judges to have the DA there. So there's nothing that's happening that they're not aware of. So a homeless outreach court may be the most fun.
Is this whole thing public where we could go and watch?
Oh, you are invited to watch. I will, if you want to come down just to see it, I'd invite you back. Let me know. I'll give you
And
the
that's
contact
not a
information.
bench warrant.
Uh-huh.
And that's
No, I won't bench warrant, and you will not come in custody because, I got others. But I would bring you back into staffing. You can sign a waiver there. You can kind of sit through the every single one of these, and you would learn more than me telling you 1,000 things, just to see the process. So you can come to any court. At the end, I'll give you the contact information on a slide.
Oh, but we can't just come into the front door.
You can come in, you absolutely can. You can come, it's an open court. It's a public courtroom. In fact, it is open to the public regarding services. So if you just wanted to see what happens with your homeless population and what services are there, you literally could walk in the front door on a Wednesday at 1:30, and it's open access. You do not need a case to access services. So just getting an idea of what's happening out there. But if you wanted to be in part of staffing, or if you wanted to do a whole walkthrough, anytime, absolutely anytime. We don't need a particular calendar for that. So Thursdays, drug court and DUI court, the same as all the drug court and DUI courts at the other location. Now, there are different cultures, right? There's going to be different things. The courts and the clerks will give you whatever heads up on how Anderson does things, or Judge Carrillo does things, or Judge Zitney does things. We are moving towards following different practices on DUIs or anything else in the other courts. So we're working on that, so just know that, but just be aware it's going to be different personalities running different things. They're very busy courts, but they're actually very, like I said, streamlined, because you don't have all the drama of trying to figure out what's happening with mental health issues generally. You have a lot of trauma and everything else, but you just don't have the same level of services. Assisted intervention court, we've talked about that in the population. That's on Thursday afternoon. Psychiatrist is present. Probably, if you're new to mental health courts, the most informative because it's a limited population, and it's always good to have a doctor present, right? The psychiatrist who gives medication is actually on site for that, and so there's a big comfort in that because the provider's there, the psychiatrist is there, and I like having the psychiatrist there. I just think it's always a good thing. With medication, and I've had this conversation, I'll have it with the participants. Medication, it's not AOT, right? It's not Laura's Law. This is not voluntary, like, hey, if you decide you're not going to take your medications, we're all good. It is not all good. It's not the court, though, ordering medications, right? So the court does not order medications. Your orders are, you have to follow the recommendation of the doctor. And that could change, and that's why having the doctor in there becomes a game changer. Because if you're dealing with clinic doctors, the philosophy that we run into is we take them where they are. And it's a really healthy philosophy because you have to get them to kind of engage, you have to get their buy-in, and that could be a lifelong process on some ends. I don't have a life. I've got 18 months, 24 months. I got to get them bought in right now. They got to be stabilized within the first 45 days. And that could be a whole lot more than we knew, walked into. So I will take people in for not going or stopping medication if prescribed by a doctor. And it's an ongoing conversation. You do not have to be in the program. It's a voluntary program. But if you're going to be here, this is what we expect. There's a lot of discussion that goes into these next generation meds. Injections for some are game changers. It will change the rest of their life. What we used to take is something that we were afraid of at the end of the day. I remember being afraid of, we always liked the bipolar diagnosis, mood disorder, much easier to work with. Schizophrenic, that was scary for us because it's a thought disorder and it was coming in and that just wasn't something we managed. Now, now at this point, schizophrenia is not, it's not something scary that we don't understand. The Invega Sustenna, some of those injections that are long-acting, takes away that psychosis part of trying to figure out if you're going to take a pill, and you have stabilization for 30 days or 60 days, and then you have it gives you time, it gives the person time, not just to feel stable, but sometimes they're learning how to actually just feel. They don't like it. I will give them that. And they'll come in, especially you get this with the TAE young ones. They don't want to be mentally ill. They're struggling with it, and they just want to be normal, right? That's kind of their profile that they speak of. They also like being manic. So I got a real problem because it's like a high for them. So they tell me, Judge, I have, first of all, sometimes it's pretend symptoms because they just want to be off meds. Sometimes it's something else, and the team will kind of tell you about that. That's not something you're determining by any means. This is something they feed to you. But know what you're dealing with. Getting them stable is a huge priority. Leave it to the team to kind of get you there. The doctor will just say, look, she has to be on X, Y, and Z. You say to the person, doctor says you have to be. I've done things like, you're sanctioned for not being on medication and for just taking yourself off and then absconding, that's jail. But the doctor says that you can take care of this by having your Invega shot by Tuesday. So I'll trail this over until Wednesday. If you follow the doctor's recommendation, we won't go into jail and all is good. So it's a constant, but keep that in mind because that idea of, it's different. And doctors struggle with it too. We bring the doctors in because that's a different philosophy. We're going to take you where you are and you guide it, or is this, we got to get you to point A before in the next 45 days, otherwise we can't keep you in program. So that's kind of where it is. So it's a choice, and be careful with those orders. Finally, the DUI court and assisted intervention alternate, and the last on Fridays, and you think Fridays would be such a good day, right? The last on Fridays is military diversion. Used to be my favorite day. It's no longer my favorite day, not because of military diversion, but the military diversion is such a big calendar that we're walking into having termination hearings in the afternoon. So instead of just having the calendar, I have the calendar, and then I have a second call, and then in the afternoon, I start to have formal evidentiary hearings. You don't need to worry about evidentiary hearings, right? It just set them. Those evidentiary hearings, we can have those, and that's easy. And if it's set over for an evidentiary hearing on the day you are, just continue it out, because not because it's easy, and not because we don't want you involved in that, but it's because it probably should be something that ends up on the termination with me, so they can appeal it, and then, you know, that issue is there. So, calendar looks better here than on my other one. Okay, this, now that I've told you about phases, should not give you a headache, but this is what our, this happens to be the mental health court. This is what our program looks like. This is the nutshell version of it, and it is in the manuals, and it's worth looking at for this reason. When you're in there and you have this in front of you, and we can give you a sheet if you like a sheet. Sometimes it's too much. It keeps you on the, what are we going to talk about, where are we now? So if you, and you'll see it, if you're talking phase 5s, the conversation is so much different than walking through this. Your conversation is going to be over here. And this is what you're asking probation to report on, right? So this is how they're going to talk to you. So probation is going to be the first part, treatment's going to be the second part. And they're going to go through, depending where the person is, that, you know, we've had clean tests, we've had them on restriction, or not restriction, they're meeting criteria for, or they're meeting their curfew times, they're complying with financial. If you do get into a situation with probation costs, every case in the collaborative courts reserves their ability to have an ability to pay hearing. You may be asked to do an ability to pay hearing. You can have them submit on the financial decks. So they give you financial, you look at the financial, you don't need to swear them in, you don't need to talk about that. You can submit on, I mean, you can go off of financial decks. If that financial deck says that they have no income or SSI is the income, then there's case law that we'll put out there. There's going to be a finding, you need to find if they have the ability to pay. And then the issue will become, is it the ability to pay? If they do not have the ability to pay now, or for the next, it's a foreseeable future, and they categorize it as a year, then that wipes their probation costs. If they are someone that is going to, within the year, have that, you can make the subsequent findings, but the case law will be there so you can look into what you want to do with that. But financials, budgets, are they doing random testing? We just recently, and how this is possible, please do not tell Judge Lindley, that we're only now, after 20 years of this, doing actual random testing, but random testing we are. So it's taken us 20 years as a best practice to tell probation, if you schedule a test, they know how to schedule, they're drinking around that. I know it's a shock, but they tell us that every time. So random testing continues. This is a computerized program that probation is using. And it is, they put in, we don't tell them that this is the general number of testing, but it is true random. They can program in. So if I have a DUI client that's coming in and there's issues, we have options. We can scram them if we can. I can GPS them. I can have them go into more testing. There's a slew of things that we can do. But I also can just have probation change random testing from 3 a week to 5 a week, right? So they're testing 5 days random. I don't know if after 7 days it's not so random anymore, but it is offsite. There's testing sites now, and that's happening. They'll tell us about home calls. Probation is doing more home calls now than they've ever done. The home calls are invaluable. It's not that we want to catch people, especially the early phases. You don't want to catch them doing wrong things. You want to catch them doing great things, and then you want to make sure that issues are resolved early on. So don't think of it like a probation search, like you're trying to get someone in trouble. It's just that they're going to have, 2 months of extra pills that they haven't taken. I like to know that in phase 1 as opposed to phase 3, right? And that's what we've got. And it's also the visual, because we also know that the family dynamics, it's part of what we do. It's no longer, and they explain it to me like this. Judge, and this was not so long ago, Judd, I just did not realize that everyone was going to be in my business. And I said, oh, that's the best statement ever. We know who you date, we know who you're sleeping with, we know who you're married to, all different people, and we know what drug you prefer, we know what medication, we know where you're supposed to be. That's a lot more information than you ever know on any given time. But we also know that you're hanging out or not hanging out with drug dealer number 2, or your ex-girlfriend who's a heroin addict is absolutely using right now. We can work with that, right? And we've got to start working on change. So it is more probation than you're ever going to be used to, but there's a positive end to that, and that more probation, the hyper probation, you're going to see on the earlier phases. By the time they get here, we want them to be self-regulating. They shouldn't be external control. You're going to start external control in the beginning, and then you're going to kind of back it off until we know we can trust them. So training wheel it through. And then you're going to have the treatment group that is going to go through each of these. Again, this is not meant to make you have a headache. It gives me a headache on a given day. But it explains how different it is to each phase, what the requirements are. Don't look at this as what the participant needs to do. Look at this as a judge on what your team needs to be doing. Because the one thing you need to, well, not one, but one of the things you need to remember is you're not really monitoring the participant, right? That's what the team's doing. You're really monitoring the team. And by monitoring the team, it's not what you would think. Monitoring the team is really, you are asking these stakeholders to step it up and do what needs to be done, not do things like they would do on a normal caseload. And that is a different role. We are asking for testing a certain way. I don't care if they're high control. This is higher control. You're in a collaborative court. This is what we need from probation. This is what we need from treatment. So think of yourself as really pushing the stakeholders and pushing the team more than you're pushing the participant as jobs go. I'm going to run through here. Oh, I'm losing my voice. I'm getting tired of hearing myself speak, which is good timing on this. So Crystal Valencia is the supervisor. She is the supervisor of all of the collaborative courts for admin. I am the supervising judge for all the collaborative courts in the county. So any questions you have, it doesn't matter which court it is, you can directly ask me those questions or send those questions. Just so you know, I always run them out of Judge Anderson because I like to think in a posse sometimes. Especially if it's a policy issue. There may be a lot going on. And Beatrice Demas is the person that's at court. She is a person that if you want to do if you want to come in and you want to go in the back door and you want to see what's actually going on, tours, if you want to sit with me on a calendar, absolutely always invited. So those are the 3 people, I guess, counting myself, although I'm impossible to get hold of on sometimes since I'm always on a calendar. So Beatrice and Crystal are the people to talk to. Only other things I have for you are this. Did we give out did everyone get a copy of the training? So this is the reference for NADCP, NDCI, Vets First. These are the websites. It is really fun to really just go in there. The training for judges, it's like modularized training. And there's training for attorneys. You can even it's open and you can even go into the training for what's law enforcement supposed to do? What is their role? Mentors, what are the mentors supposed to do? I say back to my team here, but you won't always be in the mood, but if you're bored and it's Friday night and you're on a computer, this is what I do, so whatever you think. Also, I just want to give you a visual, so if you come into my office, these are available. The drug court manuals, this is what it looks like. You can always ask Beatrice, who will be there. It gives a copy of the forms we use. There's one for WIT, there's one for veterans, and there's one for drug court. They also give those code words. So again, if you're looking at Access 2 and Access 1 and mood stabilizers, there's a lot of verbiage that we use. Vet court is probably the worst on that one. In those manuals. So those manuals will be in my office and accessible at any time. It also gives a sheet with all the requirements. So
Will those be online? Yeah, I was going to say.
no, I don't have them online. I don't have them online because they're not public access. I think what we're going to do is put them on the SharePoint. So I don't have that done yet, but I will. I think for now, until the 2 things that we're working on is bench book. So you have access to everything for every particular program. That should be right at your fingertips. Same is true with all this, and that all should be on the shared. I just don't know if you have access to L Drive. I'm not sure that you would. So I think physical files are physical. The physical books right now are where we're at. I'm not even sending them to stakeholders, except in PDF form, because believe it or not, these are highly valued. I will say. We hired a consultant to work with teams. We are, with our national mentorship status and everything else, just the verbiage in these alone, this is a big ticket item for the national level. So you may not think that's very exciting. I think it's very exciting, but it means I have them on my desk and we can get you a copy. So for any calendar. I also have a couple other things. I really did take it to the last minute, sorry. Access, when you go online and you start looking this up, there's also best practices. So when you wonder, like, why is the judge doing one-on-one communication? Why isn't it just the team? Or why is it 3 minutes? Or, what do I do? Sanction and incentives. Sometimes I go back because other counties and other states, they just throw out different ideas, and we have changed our sanction and incentives. On a personal note, I have kids, teenage kids that play volleyball competitively, which means I travel these not so great places all the time for these volleyball tournaments. And part of that means that I have made it a hobby to visit every collaborative court from here to the East Coast as part of it. And I tell you, the value in that, I can't even put in words. Like how they respond, you pick up what they do and incentives and sanctions and all the different things. I also know that, it makes me happy because generally speaking, not always, we have such great collaborative courts. I mean, goes back to Lindley. This is not something I'm taking credit for. I'm just saying that to be involved is really, it's a big deal. And finally, this is there, also accessible online. So this is through the NADCP on the training. This bench guide, it's another thing and it's another tool, but it's been very helpful, especially if you're walking into a new calendar. So anything on here, this again is in hard copy on my desk, but you have the access points, and then you have specific access points for veteran specific. So with all of that, questions please. So tired and hungry that you just, how fast can we get out? Anything, yes?
I know from here that sometimes issue get too complicated, put it over another day.
Yes?
Like I train in a different sessions, and you take it as big and do everything there. So what should be the criteria we should look at when we work in this course?
I think that it's true. When you have something to take it and there's a value that you have to take it, own it, you are that person in civil and or different assignments, that is really the only way to be effective. I think that there's a value to that as well, but for collaborative courts, I think you look at it this way. What type of case is it, right? How serious? If it's a misdemeanor case, taking it through, the ramifications are not the same. But you're not looking at a money case. You're looking at someone going into custody. The success in these cases mean a dismissal of a really serious case potentially. So you want to get there or not get there right. So I think when you're looking at these big strikes, I've got 6 strike priors and this, it's not one to take lightly. And since it's a job of continuity with the judge, it's not you're throwing it on to the other judge or you're not doing work. It's not that at all. It is very much, this is just decisions that it's an ongoing case, right? I have these cases for 2-3 years on some calendars. This is not just we get to take care of this and once it's done, it's done. It's not a one and done. It's once we take it, it's like ours forever. So I would be more inclined to pass off a decision that you don't want to be questioned on to the judge that made the original offer. And that would be, I'd say that to, it's not a TJ specific. I say that to commissioners. I say that to judges coming in. It also means your comfort level. That means that someone coming in can someone with civil background, could easily do these calendars and not really worry about some of the other issues. Time waivers are all laid out. You can have the attorneys take time waivers. So that's a not answering your question, but answering your question that I think you look at it differently. So what else? Yes.
I've had situations where sanctions, the deans say, well, they can't get their medication for the first 72 hours in jail.
I've had, it's changed. Jail, yeah, jail's changing. It's generally not the issue. If it's going to be, I rarely, if we're looking at a 72-hour sanction, that generally is to keep it. What I do with that is I will keep them in for the weekend because I don't want them getting in trouble. It's a different type of sanction. But if I can't take care of it with a day sanction, I got bigger issues going on. And it also, this is just me, how I look at the custody sanctions. I order people back every day sometimes, right? And I say, I'm going to take you in every single day. I literally am just going to wear them out because being in jail, they get acclimated, they get around their people, they get their little posse together, they go back to being shot callers if they've been in there before, and it's this instant, I've been here before, I can handle being in jail. That there's something really uncomfortable about, I need this taken care of, come back tomorrow. If you don't take care of it, I'll take you in again. And I can do that all day long, right? So I think there's more value to that constant getting whatever you need fixed than just, the easy way used to be, we used to do that, right? 7 days in, it does nothing. And after 3 days, you lose your effectiveness, and then they start going back to being comfortable in jail, which you don't want. I want them not comfortable. I don't know, does anyone know the loop, the discussion on the loop? So criminal defense, if you go to the jail and you stay in the loop, it's just like holding with medical and triage and everything else. They give us tours. Of course, the judge's tours are always better than the defense counsel tours, right? It is terrible because you're up and you're with these big groups of people and everyone's coming in off the street and it's just no one can sleep and they're trying to triage all this information and they stay up all night. So doing the loop is tantamount to just staying up all night in a very bad situation. You do 2 days or 3 days, then they start putting you in a housing situation. It gets a little more comfortable. You get some food and you get kind of in a different situation. So arguably, which actually probably makes me a worse judge or harder sentencing judge, not worse judge, but arguably the idea of sending them to the loop 3 days in a row versus a 3-day sanction, for anyone that knows the loop, that is extraordinarily hard. And even my state prison, I'll just take the medication just to make me stop. The other ones that we laugh about, and I swear I'll stop in 2 seconds or 2 minutes. I do appreciate the different kind of orders that come out of CCV1. I do things like this. I've taken away PlayStations. Honestly, I've got a court order where probation is gone, gotten the PlayStation, taken it out of the house. They can't play because they're sitting here isolating, playing PlayStation all day. The super search terms on the phone. It's like parenting except with bailiffs, right? And probation officers. I wish I had one at home. It's the super search terms, and they go back and they do forensics on the phone, right? So we know, the searches are how to buy weed in Santa Ana, so we know what's going on, and then the pictures, because they're still not smart enough to take the pictures off. So then I've taken away. We don't want to talk about this one too much. I got case specific, but I have on occasion taken away a phone or 2 or 10 or the hidden ones and the iPads. Just taken them away. And the probation officer has like a bucket of them, right? A particular person that then hides the phone and we get that phone. It's just this whole behavior thing that we have to work through. I have had no contact orders with girlfriends, boyfriends. I've had GPS. These are only sanctions, so I'm not only saying the bad things, I should probably say the good things too, but it is all about this creative way to get what they want to have happen. And my best example, I think, is I've had old school shot callers come in from state prison, and they only have been institutionalized. This is almost all they know for so much of their life. And I'm asking someone to change basically everything they know about their world, right? And they come in, going into the loop, they don't care. Going into custody, they don't care. And that actually is comforting. They know where they're going to be. Taking away their cell phone, I swear to you, they almost cried. It's amazing. And then they get out for a while, and they were fine in phase 1 and 2, but phase 3, they're like, I am not that person. When I go back in, I don't want to be that person. So when you watch the person that, at one point could care less about going to custody, and then all of a sudden is really not as thrilled about it, you know that you're really seeing you see some change. So anyway, I have spoken nonstop since I got here. Other questions, anything else about collaborative courts, about CCB1, about the politics of the county? Yes?
Full phone number for Maria.
All right, Maria, not her cell phone number. Her full phone number is 657-622-5801. And the beauty with Maria's phone number is if Maria's not there, Kirsten will answer. And if Kirsten's not there, then Courtney will answer. Otherwise known as super clerk, someone will answer. So it's easier if you're looking for me to use that number because they'll track me down.
We need that number.
Yes, 657-622-5801. Don't tell Maria I'm giving you her number. Maria is super clerk number 1. Maria Concepcion is the lead clerk. I have 3 clerks in that courtroom and then backup, but they're in the back offices. So, and again, if you want to email and talk to Beatrice, that's your person. Anything else? Are you all going to come to collaborative courts, or I scared you off? I was afraid to show the chart because the chart I thought might scare you.
I
Yes.
just want to say one thing, I served this court several times, I never had a chance to thank the staff for helping me, but the judge who come in once in a blue moon, they really make it very easy, because they argue different things.
Yes.
And make it possible you can move on a consensus that you can see from that.
Those,
That's really helpful for us to come in once in a while.
for those, and I know there's only a few that haven't done the actual collaborative court, you have to try it because I agree with that. They will not let you make a mistake, right? If they know it's a contested issue, they'll be like, look, just do this, put it over. Or if they know it's something that we can take care of this, it's just such a great way to be right in the middle of a solution court, right in the middle of some of the biggest issues hitting our county. And it's such a positive, although hard, but positive, when you see all the work being done, it really, you walk away like, I am in the middle of the solutions and changing things. And it's just, it can be exhausting, but those teams will not let you down. So, is that it? All right. We cut.